The U.S. imports $144 billion in products that are at risk of being produced with forced labor. $144 billion. That includes the shrimp you barbecue, the clothes that you wear, and the cell phones in your bags. Our best estimates tell us that at least 40.3 million people on this planet, probably more, live in conditions of modern slavery. What so many of us don't realize is that more than half, roughly 52%, are in forced labor. Forced labor, it is a hidden, complex, global crime that's hard to detect for a few reasons. It doesn't have one look. Those in forced labor don't always recognize that they have been trafficked. It's agnostic to age and gender, even though women and children are primarily affected. At the heart of it, someone is coerced or deceived into work because of an economic vulnerability. And it can happen in a lot of ways. Violence, intimidation, more often than not, it is subtle coercion or deception. You may have heard shocking stories of tomato farmers in Florida, held against their will, sexually harassed, and only released into the fields to haul and sweat without shade or water. Or maybe a woman who came from the Philippines to work as a hotel housekeeper. She hoped she could send money back home. Instead, she found herself in debt, not earning much of a wage, living in an overcrowded apartment, and being taken to and from work at the whim of someone else. You may have unknowingly passed her at your favorite hotel. This happens because the supply chains of our companies are often opaque. They end up employing workers who have been deceived into their jobs with the promise of great pay, good living conditions and working conditions, and maybe a recruiter who paid the recruitment fees. The chains of modern slavery, they don't always look like the chains of the past. Today's chains might look like sexual harassment, debt bondage, abusive and unsafe working conditions like the refusal for shade or water, dangerous building infrastructure, and other insidious methods of control. All over the world, including the US, people are unknowingly signing away their freedoms to substantial harm for minuscule reward, if any at all. They have lost so many human rights that we enjoy, along with their sense of dignity. Forced labor is modern slavery, and it's a human rights issue. Whether it's close to home or far away, whether the chains of modern slavery manifest themselves as physical or psychological, subtle or significant, your everyday tomato, t-shirt, and even the materials that make up your home could be the product of someone else's deep suffering. As buyers and businesses, we might not truly understand the painful picture that is behind the products and services that we love. But here's another take on this issue. For a trafficker or questionable recruitment firm, modern slavery, it's not a crime. It's simply a business, and a pretty profitable one. Just looking at forced labor, it reaps upwards of $50 billion in profits per year. The products are humans bought and sold for a profit, and with forced labor, they're being used to maximize that profit. If we look at modern slavery as an industry, then what if legitimate businesses reward employees for taking steps towards progress in crafting an ethical supply chain? If we connect compensation and culture in this way, could that be one way where we foster a business culture that harmonizes profit and purpose? We can, because the dialogue around human rights and ethical supply chains, it's been moving from the altruistic to the practical. Tackling this global crime and humanitarian crisis, it's traditionally been left to governments and nonprofits to solve. But in 2011, the UN published its guiding principles on business and human rights with a protect, respect, and remedy framework. It brought business into the conversation. And with the massive disruption in our supply chains this year, it's getting increased attention. In 2015, the UN published its Sustainable Development Goals for achievement by 2030. Those goals create a framework to address some of our most pressing environmental, societal, and economic issues. It also includes an end to modern slavery. In the meantime, business has been evolving. We are now shifting to a world where businesses are being asked not only what they create, but how and why they create. What is their purpose for being? Beyond profits, of course. Are they elevating their game as a good corporate citizen? With the increasing urgency around climate change, Black Lives Matter, other social and economic inequalities, even our current health pandemic, businesses are being asked to find better ways to treat our people and planet. They're not being asked to solve the issues, no business can, but they are being asked to actively mitigate them and maybe even positively impact them. You might be noticing this evolution in the brands that you know and love. Just look at fashion and food. It's becoming so much more than just vintage-inspired pullovers and sustainable snacks. Companies like Athleta and Danone and Patagonia, they're called Certified B Corporations, and they are paving a path for companies to operate in ways that are kinder on our people and planet. They proactively intertwine profit and purpose by holistically thinking about their relationship and impacts on consumers, the environment, their business partners, customers, and of course, shareholders. You, as a consumer, are influencing this evolution with your buying choices. This business approach is close to my heart. One of my fundamental beliefs in life is that everything is given to us in trust. Everything. Our health, our wealth, and our relationships. And when guided by that belief, we tend to act in ways that both protect ourselves and others. Modern slavery, I believe that has to be the greatest issue of our time. It reflects a breakdown of that trust, and it encompasses everything: gender discrimination, racism, poverty, self-worth. Businesses, on the other hand, it has this immense ability to create, connect, and transform. My belief that business does well by doing good led me to partner with the CEO of AbleMade. We're an emerging fashion brand, and we push our team to ask questions about human rights and the supply chain. We seek to reset and raise standards because we're always designing creations that are more gentle on the makers, the wearers, and the planet. We're a small company. We know we can't solve massive humanitarian issues, and it's not going to be perfect. There is no perfect solution. But we can build these priorities into the soul of the company. And at the same time, traditional or profit-driven only companies, they are also getting proactively pushed to consider environmental, social, and governance considerations, or ESG criteria, as drivers of shareholder value. Increasingly, though, it's being considered to be another way to achieve what we're talking about today, which is aligning purpose, profit, and impact. Investors are looking at things like diversity, gender pay, human rights, and impacts on the environment to assess a company's sustainability and resiliency. With $30 trillion going towards ESG-related investments, others are actually measuring and ranking companies on their efforts in these categories. To advance these efforts, in some cases, a company may be getting financing premised on achievement of sustainability goals. As complex and as nuanced as these issues are, they reflect an invitation for business to be less extractive and linear and more relational. Unfortunately, on the human rights front, progress is slow. And at this moment, we are in the gap of a paradigm shift. And paradigm shifts, they're always chaotic. But that chaos, it's so good and needed to foster a new order that aligns purpose, profit, and impact. And as we move through that shift, we need to think about how we focus internally on our employees to drive that impact, because we reward what we value. And our corporate scandals, they give us important lessons on this front. Just look at the scandals in our financial industry. Exploited compensation and reward systems, they tip the cultures to the unethical. Sometimes it doesn't matter what a company's mission and values are if the bonuses are driving behaviors that are not aligned with the company's mission. Compensation programs, they're meant to attract, retain, and motivate employees. Bonuses typically drive achievement of profitability goals. things like reduction in expenses, increases in net income, total shareholder return, and the like. They're designed to align the interests of employees with stakeholders. But as ESG and these other business approaches like B Corps mature, we have more stakeholders. We have you, the consumer, our environment, customers, business partners, our shareholders. So how businesses measure and reward employees needs to be reimagined to align with this broader group. Instead of compensation programs being used to primarily drive profit, they also need to be reevaluated for new opportunities. And mitigating forced labor in the supply chain, it is an opportunity. Rewarding the collective for driving protection of human rights can transform business. It's not without complexity or skepticism, but it does challenge convention and fosters that new order. Right now, companies reward things like protection of their own employees' safe working conditions or achievement of diversity and inclusion goals. These goals, they're somewhat measurable, they're quantifiable, but they also represent human rights that those in forced labor have lost. And as business evolves, companies are also looking to reward things like steps taken towards fulfillment of climate goals and employee engagement on sustainability. These goals are not as easy to measure. They're not necessarily even easy to define, but they are being measured by progress towards participation in coalitions or broader engagement towards actions. If we look at just forced labor, what if we similarly reward employees for steps and quality taken towards that ethical supply chain? Steps like evaluating where your raw materials are coming from, not just for the best price, but for the best price in the most humane process. Choosing suppliers that are competitively priced, but also have shared values and a willingness to be transparent and align on human rights practices throughout the value chain. Participating in industry coalitions that advance greater protection of human rights. For example, if you're a company that is a buyer of tomatoes, maybe it's participating in the Fair Food Program. If you're a fashion brand, it's choosing materials that also support the economic empowerment of those local communities. Changing reward systems, it's one way we change culture. And if we draw upon the history lessons of those in the financial industry as business evolves, and we put human rights at the forefront of business practices, we can bridge the gap between profit and purpose and create value and impact. And when a company seeks to understand and address its impacts on modern slavery and other human rights, alignment with company values is fostered, accountability is created, employees are empowered, and culture is enhanced. It's simply the right thing to do. When companies take that next step to incentivize purpose through their compensation programs, employees, they're rewarded for both profit and impact. Most importantly, every human being should be able to walk through this short life with dignity and respect. And we have a shared responsibility in this endeavor. Thank you.